Hey everyone, this video is made from tangents going in depth on Neo Metal Sonic, cut down and elaborated on from my larger video talking about Death Battle's Cell vs Metal Sonic. So if you weren't interested in watching that and just want to hear me talk about Neo Metal Sonic in depth, then this is the video for you. So to start, this is Metal Sonic. Naturally, Metal Sonic, despite being an incredibly capable robot, does not take defeat very well, which led to a very unique and standout instance for this character. In Sonic Adventure, Metal makes a brief cameo in Eggman's base floating in a tank, possibly undergoing diagnostics or upgrades or just being worked on and improved for whenever his next outing will be. But he's not the only robot being worked on here. The next tank over contains another robot Sonic resembling Mecha Sonic from Sonic 2, and right between them is where E102 Gamma is completed. I bring up Gamma because of his story in Sonic Adventure. He is programmed to follow and carry out orders from Eggman, but across his story he starts to question both them and his own existence and turns against Eggman and his fellow robots. And this wasn't an isolated incident, as the same would happen for later Eggman creations such as E123 Omega and Gemerald. In Metal's next appearance, Sonic Heroes, we are introduced to a very different looking robot, Neo Metal Sonic. I know they are technically the same character, but there is so much distinguishing them from each other. Neo Metal, to me at least, feels like something entirely new built around the existing character, if that kinda makes sense. And different people have very different feelings towards this iteration of the character. Starting with his design, you will either think he's the coolest, badass looking thing ever, or you will think he looks a little bit silly. As for me, is this supposed to be a cape or something? It looks like half a skirt. So how did he become like this? Well, it kinda happens off-screen before the game's story even takes place. Maybe to be a surprise reveal? Not that it was much of one. Some think Eggman rebuilt Metal into Neo, and while he probably does give Metal tweaks and upgrades between adventures, Eggman was not responsible for creating Neo Metal Sonic, because the Neo upgrade was something Metal did to himself behind Eggman's back. And apparently not many people know about that. He basically says this during the final boss, where he says he could never surpass Sonic, so he rebuilt his body with his own hands. And in the last place you'd expect, in Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games on DS, there's a story mode where you can collect news briefs with facts and trivia about things from each series and its characters. And one of them straight up says, Metal Sonic once modified himself and turned against Dr. Eggman. And if those don't convince you, just think about the facts that Eggman, who wants to be a king, who wants to be a ruler, who wants to be top dog, why would he make his lackey, his underling, all-powerful and intelligent, but also make him resemble an emperor? Because if it's Metal's own ambition to be the ruler of all living things, doesn't it make more sense that he would make himself look like an emperor? This was his moment. He did not want to be an equal to Sonic. He changed himself to be superior to Sonic, and his design reflects that. His head is shaped closer to Sonic's than before, going from 3 spikes to 6, but it goes a bit overboard with their excessive length. Bigger and sharper shoulder pads, a studded belt with the cape skirt thing, giant pointy kneecaps, and the big sleeves, I think? And I'm not sure, but I think he might be taller as well. This is his idea of looking superior, more important, more powerful. He is goddamn peacocking, isn't he? Following up, in the IDW comics, post-Sonic Forces, Neo Metal Sonic returns, but this time, it was Eggman's active involvement, because as a contingency to win the war, also he probably didn't trust Infinite that much, out of desperation, he went out of his way to recreate Neo Metal Sonic. And the main difference between Sonic Heroes and IDW is that in IDW, Neo Metal Sonic is still loyal to Eggman and hopes to search for him to put him back in power. That's a huge difference. I'm not entirely sure how exactly Metal upgraded himself and how he was able to give himself those new abilities, most prominent being his ability to speak. Metal Sonic is famously mute. No mouth, no voice chip, just silent, aside from some electronic sounds. The only times regular Metal Sonic has ever spoke is in the spin-off Sonic Pinball Party, and Sonic Generations when interacting with classic Metal Sonic for the boss fight. That's weird, I wonder why they did that. In Sonic Rivals 2, he doesn't have spoken dialogue, but rather his dialogue describes what's being displayed in his vision's HUD, kinda like in the Terminator movies. Honestly, Metal Sonic being mute is something I really love about the character. No chit-chat, just actions. And the best part of it is you can usually tell what he's thinking by his body language alone, which allows him to come off pretty expressive despite his face only having a permanent scowl and a death stare. I freaking love it. And when he's not expressing through body language, you're immediately reminded he's a cold, heartless machine. The duality of this is handled really well, but once he gives himself the ability to speak, God, he does not shut up with the ego talk. We get it, you think you're better than us, gosh! He also gained the ability to turn into a puddle of liquid metal and shapeshift to mimic the appearance of Sonic and Eggman to manipulate the other characters. I have no idea where he got the T-1000 powers from, but some say it's gained from getting Chaos's data from Chocola, being a Chao that shares Chaos's DNA, and Froggy, who briefly had a part of Chaos in him. But he could already do that before he got Chaos's data. And Chaos can't shapeshift into other characters either. Actually, coming back to this in editing, I'm realizing Neo already had Froggy and Chocola since Team Rose's whole goal was to find them, but it's in this cutscene where you hear him say, Chaos data has been copied. So, did he choose not to copy them until now, or did he just feel like saying it for the audience after the fact? Who knows? Oh, and don't get me started on the most terrifying ability, and it didn't even get its start here. So starting with Knuckles Chaotix, Metal Sonic is granted the ability to absorb energy sources and use them to transform. In Knuckles Chaotix, it's the Chaos Rings or Dark Chaos Ring, I keep forgetting what it's called. Although thinking about it, we don't see a transformation, just Metal follows Eggman standing in the ring off screen and then the boss fight starts. Did Eggman combine with Metal Sonic? Is that why they're red and yellow? No, that'd be too weird. Although, could Eggman be piloting this giant Metal Sonic Kai like a mech? Sorry, just thinking aloud. And then they bring it back in Sonic Mania, where he absorbs the Phantom Ruby. So naturally, a power-up that over the top and broken, you'd think would get more elaboration. It doesn't. I think we've only seen it a grand total of 3 times. But the most well-known of abilities unique to the Neo version of Metal Sonic would be all lifeform data successfully copied. Neo copies data from other characters during Sonic Heroes, saying all lifeform data has been successfully copied when encountering Team Sonic, ultimate lifeform data has been copied for Team Dark, and Chaos data has been copied for Team Rose, and Team Chaotix gets nothing. So either he didn't feel like acknowledging Rouge, Omega, Amy, Cream, Big, Vector, Charmy, and Espio, or he didn't bother copying their data at all. And in this game's last story, it's revealed all that data Neo had collected would grant himself their powers by destroying the tower on the Egg Fleet and using its pieces to build himself a new body using that data. The Kaiju transformation is back, and more hideous than ever. This Metal Madness. Yep, that name's pretty fitting if this is Metal's descent into madness given physical form. The Chaos data went a long way as this robot has become something monstrous just like Perfect Chaos. And are you even trying to be a better Sonic anymore? This isn't a hedgehog, this is a giant freaking dragon! Oh, even Sonic agrees with me! But Metal Madness is still incomplete, and he finishes by building wings and tearing himself off the base of the tower. This weird-ass thing is so incredibly far removed from the mechanical recreation of Sonic. He's changed so much. Has anyone ever noticed their voices are different between Neo and Overlord? Neo Metal still sounds somewhat robotic in his delivery, but Metal Overlord doesn't, giving the impression that this form has evolved past that.
All lifeform data successfully copied. It's no use, but why can't I defeat you? Long time no see, Sonic, but I can never seem to defeat you. That is why I transform my own body with my own hands. But that was the past. Now you're nothing but a speck of dust to me.
Neo talks monotone like Gamma or Omega, but for Overlord, it's almost as if he's evolved beyond that. You can hear the emotion in his voice expressing his frustration, fury, and desperation of not being able to do the one thing he was created and programmed for. To beat Sonic. It's grown into pure obsession to the point where he's convinced himself that now he deserves to be called the real Sonic, and Sonic is now considered the loathsome copy, or in Japanese, his imperfect self. Anyway, as dangerously powerful as he is, even being able to use Shadow's Chaos Control without the need of an emerald, he still proves himself to be just talk as Team Super Sonic wastes him and he reverts back to Neo and then regular old Metal Sonic. Something, power of teamwork. Still. Let's circle back. How did Metal Sonic figure out how to give himself those upgrades? When did he become this cunning to plan this whole scheme and manipulate all the other characters, almost as if he were as smart as Dr. Eggman? Did I miss something? Something I never realized before? As I said earlier, I always felt Metal Sonic and Neo Metal Sonic, despite being technically the same character, feel very distinctly different from each other, like Neo is something new entirely. Well, it turns out, for a long time, fans had theorized that Metal had copied data from his own creator, adapting his personality traits in the process. And eventually, when Neo returned in the IDW comics, this was confirmed to be the case, as it says he was granted Eggman's biodata. So it seems prior to Sonic Heroes, when Metal gained the ability to copy data, he must have copied Eggman. On top of already being pushed by his hatred of Sonic and his desire to prove himself superior enough to go behind the Doctor's back, he's now gained Eggman's intelligence, lust for power, and sense of ambition. He's not only surpassed his creator, he's become him. Quite literally, as he spends the whole game masquerading as Eggman, taking his place and control of his army as well. So somebody had to be building them robots. But the copy ability itself comes entirely out of nowhere in Sonic Heroes' story and only appears again in Sonic Rivals gameplay. And there's going to be a lot of emphasis on this ability in this video, and we genuinely don't know its rules and limitations because none were ever established. But if there's a lead on where this ability came from, I think I have an idea that surprisingly I've heard nobody else talk about before. When Sonic Heroes released introducing Neo Metal Sonic and his ability to copy data, another game released the same month and also featured a robot with the ability to copy data from other characters. Sonic Battle released on the GBA and introduced the character Emerald, an ancient Gizoid that was previously in Eggman's possession but is discarded at the beginning of the game where it's found by Sonic. Emerald has the ability to scan other characters just by watching them, allowing him to copy their moves and abilities, all of which are stored in his database and over time starts copying their personality traits as well. There are too many coincidences between this and what Neo Metal can do, especially how Neo scans with his eyes and Emerald needs to look at an ability to copy it, which is also showcased in Dark Beginnings, where you can see him watching Shadow spin dash just before doing it himself. And in IDW, Sonic lands an attack on Neo before exclaiming "data has been copied" and then retaliates with the same attack. And a plot point of Sonic Battle is before discarding him, Eggman was experimenting and reverse engineering Emerl, extracting files and data from his memory and using it to build inferior knockoffs of Emerl called E121Phi. I think it's a safe assumption to make that this reverse engineering could have started prior to Sonic Heroes and could have directly led to that data and ancient tech from Emerl being installed in Metal Sonic. Which, if the theory of Neo Metal copying Eggman's personality traits is true, then that would fall perfectly in line with how Emerald adopted personality traits from Sonic and other characters. And I guess I have to address this because I know people will be commenting, but the official timeline on the Japanese Sonic channel says Sonic Battle is after Shadow the Hedgehog, so Eggman couldn't have had Emerl before Heroes. And to that I say, what difference does it make? Shadow the Hedgehog 2005 didn't even exist yet when Heroes in Battle came out in 2003, and the Japanese timeline that dropped only last year, and the placement of Shadow on that timeline is a retroactive change that was made 22 years later. And even so, Battle still takes place after Heroes, even if Shadow 05 is now between them, which doesn't suddenly mean Eggman couldn't have had Emerl in his possession. It's like the Metal Sonic in Sonic CD and Mecha Sonic Mark 1 and Sonic 2 debate again, and we've already seen in other games Eggman is always working on projects in the background of one story even if they aren't finished or used until a later game. Anyway, we don't even know how much time takes place between Heroes, Shadow, and Battle, presumably not much. And in Battle's story, Gun is only now being made aware of Eggman having recovered Emerl because they said Emerl had been misplaced for 50 years, meaning they had no idea where he was hidden the whole time. I think Emerald being reverse engineered by Eggman may be a decent explanation for the origin of Metal's copy ability, but I do still wonder about something else. Metal Sonic has the ability to absorb an external power source and use it to either supercharge himself, or use that power to transform Kaiju mode like I said earlier. In both Chaotix and Mania, the plot MacGuffin of the week gives him the power to transform. In Sonic 4, Metal discovers the mysterious pink orb that amplifies him with this powerful pink energy. And Mania Adventures briefly has Metal use the Chaos Emeralds to make him invincible, but no actual transformation. By my understanding at least, it's a little different from how living beings can control chaos energy with their minds and hearts to manipulate it into abilities, compared to how Eggman creations can use the emeralds as an energy source like a supercharged battery, which appears to be what Metal is doing in Mania Adventures. It's the only time we've seen this, with the most similar thing being Super Mecha Sonic, which I will get into more later. But when copying Shadow's data and transforming into Metal Overlord, Metal is able to use Chaos Control, which is an impressive feat and workaround for that limitation, and also goes back to the parallel with Emerald, who could also copy Shadow's Chaos powers. which is likely because he's a Gizoid, which use ancient technology beyond comprehension, and for story reasons, Emerald had a connection to the Chaos Emeralds too. I mean, his name is Emerald, like Emerald, but there's a problem with that. It may be Shadow's data, but as I explained in my video on Chaos Control, Shadow has enough Chaos energy in him to warp short distances, but to use Chaos Control to do something such as slow or freeze time, he needs at least one Chaos Emerald. But Metal Overlord isn't using the Chaos Emeralds, because he doesn't even have them. Sonic and friends have them, which begs a new question: how? The only similar examples I can think of is the Bio Lizard, which was overflowing with chaos energy from its own body. Guess overexposure from chaos drives being stuffed in you would do that to a poor salamander. And Devil Doom has the power to use chaos control without an emerald too, although he kinda pre-juiced on the emerald to initiate his transformation, kinda like what Perfect Chaos did. I feel like Sonic Heroes skipped something because I feel like Metal Overlord needed a big source of energy for his transformation and powers, and I don't think he gets that from scanning data of Froggy, Shadow, and Chocola. Data isn't power, it's information. It's not like Metal was taking energy or anything when copying other characters, just their abilities, how their bodies use them, how they function, something along those lines. When Emerald copied data from other characters, it didn't automatically make him stronger. Most of Sonic Battle is full of training and fighting stronger foes for him to learn from and slowly build up his power over time. Also eating Chaos Emeralds. But what I want to know is, what kind of power exactly did Metal absorb to do all the stuff he does in Sonic Heroes? Where did the liquid metal and shapeshifting come from? Something he absorbed? And more importantly, what kind of juice was he running to randomly summon a bolt of lightning to destroy a tower on the Egg Fleet and combine it with pieces of data he collected to transform into this? The truth is, I have no idea. Clearly Sonic Heroes doesn't either, unless they did and left it out, because next time Neo Metal did this, he used the Master Emerald. Neo Metal Sonic's return in IDW, as stated earlier, has Eggman go out of his way to recreate Neo Metal Sonic, who unlike last time is acting not for himself, but under full loyalty of his creator, because Eggman reprogrammed him to, and never to be disobedient and rebellious again. And Neo sets himself up on Angel Island where he uses the Master Emerald to grant himself power, which introduces us to a new transformation. Now, Super Neo Metal Sonic is really interesting to talk about. Writer Ian Flynn confirmed Super Neo Metal's form is based on Super Mecha Sonic from Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Mecha Sonic charges himself with energy from the Master Emerald, giving him a temporary powered up state. He turns gold, he can fly, he has more powerful attacks, but he can't maintain it for very long and has to charge up again. I need to make this clear, this isn't a real super transformation equivalent like that of Super Sonic or Shadow. You know, reflection of thoughts and feelings, chaos's power, enriched by the heart, that sort of thing. It's an artificial approximation of one because, you know, machine. I do wonder how he changes colour though. I kinda like to interpret it as the energy is so powerful the blue metal exterior glows hot red, making it look orangey and glowy, which would kind of explain the invincibility too. Although Ian Flynn describes it as super armor. Now Super Neo also appears in Speed Simulator, an official Roblox Sonic spin-off. I'm not too familiar with it, but I am fortunate to know Nybrock.rock. Imagine not knowing how to pronounce your own friends' names. Who's known for making fan models and renders of Sonic characters, and also worked with me and a few others in the Sonic Colors Ultimate Cutscenes video I made. But right now, he is actually one of the lead devs on Sonic Speed Simulator, and since a lot of people are unclear on if Speed Simulator counts as canon or not, I asked him directly. And to summarize, basically it depends on what Sega and Sonic Team want at the time. Speed Simulator is technically its own separate thing inside its own bubble until stated otherwise. It follows the same rules and concepts from canon to align with the main series, but it's kind of a one-sided deal, as stuff in the games, IDW, or Chaotix case files, etc. can affect what happens in Speed Simulator, but it doesn't affect any of them in turn, hence the term canon adjacent, which I think is a good idea because it allows for a lot of unique events and what-if scenarios to explore, one of which is a boss fight against Super Neo Metal Sonic, who has used the power of the 7 Chaos Emeralds to make himself super. And I believe it was most people's understanding that you can swap out the Master Emerald with the Chaos Emeralds and it pretty much works the same, and Sega and Sonic Team were okay with that. That's what I thought was the case, and seems to be what Death Battle was going with. However, in my talk with Nybrock.rock, he actually corrected this, saying Eggman was draining the Chaos Emeralds and using their energy to power up Neo Metal. In his words, it wasn't direct using the Chaos Emerald, it needed to be adapted. Honestly, I think it's an easy mistake to make because not everyone has played Sonic Speed Simulator, myself included. And it's incredibly easy to miss this stuff when you're trying to research it online. Super Neo proves formidable, taking down both Sonic and Knuckles, but ultimately gets taken down by Shadow. As Ian Flynn put it, since the super armor is made of chaos energy, Shadow is able to break through it using a Chaos Spear, which is also made of chaos energy. But refusing to accept defeat, Neo copies Shadow's biodata and uses the Master Emerald's limitless power to merge with his surrounding fortress to become Master Overlord. Possibly his most powerful form yet, but powerful doesn't mean invincible, because even without a super form, Sonic is still able to damage him. Then all the other main characters show up, and before Master Overlord can do anything, he's absolutely overwhelmed by all these characters rushing him at once, and he's powerless to do anything about it. Tails drives a ship right into him, Knuckles removes the Master Emerald, look how proud of himself he is, and the battle is over, just like that. Embarrassing. Neo Metal, despite having a short time in the spotlight, is clearly a fan favourite to many. Some may go as far as to say this should be the default for Metal Sonic's character, to be an independent, reoccurring big bad separate from Eggman, and hate that he returns to his normal form and refer to Eggman programming the rebelliousness out of him as being lobotomized into a mindless servant. And that's where I disagree. While Neo Metal and his story is a fascinating and creative take on the character, I think too much of Neo outside of rare instances takes away from what makes him interesting. Neo is a break out of the norm, and making him default kinda ruins everything that was already great about regular Metal Sonic. From his simple yet perfect design to his role as a reverse mirror to Sonic, the living, rounded, energetic, nature and freedom-loving smart-mouthed animal, and the cold, sharp, rigid, artificial, mute minion and machine. I love that dynamic so much, and I love the dynamic between Eggman and Metal Sonic as well, especially in recent years. I'm not gonna lie, Neo Metal can be cool at times, but others, his over-designed, over-the-top, egotistical self can come off as a bit goofy, and to be completely honest, was Metal even better off as Neo? Neo's whole existence isn't about independence as his own villain separate from Eggman, but in reality, Neo is suffering. His existence is a prison of his own making, driven by the obsessive need to be as he is programmed to do, to be superior to Sonic and by any means necessary. Even when he overthrows Eggman, he can't escape his master as he takes on the role and ambitions of the Doctor because it's all he knows. Eggman's mind is a part of him now. The truth is, Neo Metal is delusion, and Metal Overlord is insanity. Heck, the incomplete version of that form is literally named Metal Madness. Even their designs reflect this. Neo Metal Sonic is the facade trying to impress and show he's the one in control, and Metal Overlord is the true mess that facade was hiding, losing control of himself entirely, unable to accept his reality. Things he says in his boss fight sound so delusional and kind of desperate. His head filled with all these elements from his base programming, his Eggman intelligence and ambitions of ruling all, being the superior Sonic and the ultimate life form, it's full of clashing ideas and contradictions. It's a full identity crisis. Like I said, Metal was suffering. This just isn't who Metal Sonic really is. I think it's safe to say at some point later Eggman removed Metal's ability to copy data, as we haven't seen it since Sonic Rivals. I think it might have been before Sonic Rivals 2, where Metal Sonic's updated modern design is revealed, but it's a little confusing because outside of cutscenes in gameplay, he's identical to how he appears and functions in Rivals 1, but that's besides the point. And I don't think Metal Sonic being reprogrammed to prevent any further rebelliousness takes away from Metal, nor makes him mindless. Metal without a mouth still expresses attitude and personality, and even occasionally ignores orders, or acting on his own accord like in Sonic Rivals 2 when he breaks himself open to give Shadow a Chaos Emerald that was hidden inside him. And twice now in IDW, we've seen instances where Metal still defaults to attacking Sonic, but when Eggman or Sage tells him to stop, he's shown to temporarily put aside his hatred for Sonic when he recognizes there's a bigger threat that should be prioritized, where he will willingly cooperate and team up with Sonic. I know I say willingly, but I don't know if the reprogramming forces him to comply immediately, but he does show disdain for the idea, so I assume it's begrudgingly. Even though the opinions I made on the Death Battle video made some people think I hate Metal Sonic, that couldn't be further from the truth, because I couldn't be more upfront about how much I love Metal Sonic if I tried. Why else would I be building a life-size replica for his debut in the 4th movie? Anyway, stay tuned, and stay awesome. Bye.